I really believe that our neighbors around us need to know why we still have hope.
That's a story, but people don't feel like it's a story.
How are we building relationships, people to people and people to God?
This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. Hey, Pod Strangely Warm family, welcome back to a wonderful new episode featuring one of our favorite and multi-time guests now, Reverend Stacey Piyakhun, the Director of Multiplication here at the Horizon Texas Conference. Stacey, welcome back to the pod.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
It's been all of about 3 months since we saw you on the podcast.
It's been a little while.
Here.
It has been.
And we're continuing in these conversations that are connected, not just on the podcast, but to the broader work of the equipping of the saints of the Horizon Texas Conference, right? We had a summer set of multiplication masterclasses. We've had a set here in the fall. In this season, our theme is Reaching Our Neighbors. We had amazing conversations this summer about connections that multiply, and we're excited to see what conversations we can have about reaching our neighbors. But I got to confess that for me, reaching our neighbors begins with a spirit of curiosity. And so I want to know, what's the most amazing thing that you've been able to do in the time since we last got to podcast together?
Yeah, well, the last 6 or 8 months has been big for our family. Our oldest daughter got married. Our youngest daughter received a promotion at her job. And so she's now at 21, the head coach of a fitness gym. And so she's working there. And so we have been walking together as a family through a season of change where we've all been growing and exploring together what it means to come into a new
job
chapter.
In there too, right?
I got a new job as well. The only one that's held steady is my husband, Keith. And he it just stays home, takes care of the dogs, makes sure that we've got food in the house and the laundry is done. And he's getting real good at some of those chores.
And we thank God for Keith.
We do thank God for Keith.
Amen.
Yeah.
In the midst of all of this transition and new opportunities, and that can be both a gift and hard. What has been the most kind of life-giving experience you've had in this time of new beginnings?
Gosh, I think, so much of what we do across the conference, because of our geography, we all see each other on little bitty Zoom screens or Teams screens, which, yes, we know Teams is equal times problematic and also comes with a Microsoft package.
Right,
so we understand
it's
how
already
that works.
paid for, a good use of your apportionment dollars.
It absolutely is. And so I think the most life-giving part of this is probably twofold. One, anytime I'm able to be out there with our clergy and our laity and churches, anytime we're out exploring new things, we've opened 2 new buildings in the Northwest Texas district since we have been together last, both at Grace Lubbock and at Open Door in Clyde. They had their first service this last Sunday.
Very cool.
So it's been a really exciting season across our conference of watching God do some amazing new things and of us exploring together, particularly through this season of masterclasses, what it's like to be curious about our neighbors, to find the courage to move into those spaces and share our personal stories of faith. Makes everybody a little nervous, but we've done it, and I'm really excited about that. And so we've started talking about that as strength training.
That's awesome.
We're moving into a season where we have some muscles that have atrophied as a church, and that's okay. That happens to everybody. And so we're moving into getting those stronger.
Well, and the beauty of that metaphor is that it gives us that it's not just, we don't go from atrophied muscles to Arnold Schwarzenegger overnight.
Correct.
Right? There's work in it daily and steadily, and that's part of the reason why you may hear a common theme between our summer master classes and our fall master classes, right?
Right.
Connections that multiply, reaching our neighbors. This is a muscle we need to work again and again and again for it to grow and for it to get stronger. It sounds like it's been an amazing summer professionally. We were glad to have you be with us on Launch Sunday for Mosaic at Martin as well.
I forgot about Mosaic. We launched Mosaic as well.
Yeah.
We've got a new expression, a fresh expression down launching off 6th Street in Austin.
Oh, nice.
Where one of our pastors is working on gathering local musicians and forming a community of faith and exploring what that's like. So it's in its very infant stages, but it's been exciting.
Does that officially become the coolest church in the conference as it kind of comes into being?
It officially becomes one of the things that most people don't know is happening, but is probably one of the coolest things to see what God's doing at.
For sure, for sure. And there's kind of a cool factor of being on 6th Street in that musician community, and that's a unique planting gift.
It is.
And an amazing thing that we talk about the breadth and the diversity of our church communities here. And I think we'd have to list a lot of things before we get to Musician Church on 6th Street in Austin. But how cool is it that we get to be a part of what God is doing in that way?
Absolutely.
Through our Methodist connection. Often, when we have folks on the podcast, we hear about some of the professional things they're doing in their pastor life and their conference leadership life. And I'm thankful for all the cool stuff you've been able to be a part of. But we also ask folks to bring something that represents kind of who they are outside of work, right? That self on a shelf. But you've had a lot of selves on the shelf over time because you've been with us a good number of times. And so I'm curious, in kind of this season where your home life has been in, lots of growing too, what has been something connected to your home life, maybe a place you've gone or a connection you've been able to kind of invest in that is bringing you joy in life since we last talked?
Gosh, a place connected to my home life. I'm going to have to say, and this is going to blend into professional life a little bit, but it really is mostly personal, even though it's going to become professional. So my undergrad is from West Texas A&M in Canyon.
Oh, nice.
Go Buffs.
Nice. Yeah.
It's a little secret fact that people don't know about me. While I grew up kind of in and around the Metroplex, I had always gone to band camp at WT. And so it just felt like home when I went to school, and worked at 3 churches while I was there: a Catholic church, United Methodist Church, the Wesley Foundation. Someone should have said, you have a call to ministry. Right. But they didn't. And so I just kept going in this music education path. But I haven't been back to Canyon in a while. I've been to Amarillo, and our Amarillo New Church Start has started doing tailgates with a student ministry at WT. And so this weekend, Keith and I are jumping an airplane early Saturday morning, and we're flying out to Amarillo. I think we'll probably have breakfast at the Cracker Barrel and hang out there and get to celebrate All Saints with them at Amarillo UMC. But Saturday, that's a football day at my alma mater. Keith's an Aggie, like a real Aggie, and I'm an imitation Aggie, he says, even though I'm a Buff. And so we get to go. I get to wear my alumni gear, and that'll be really exciting.
That's really cool.
That's giving me joy.
Yeah, we are in the process of getting to know each other. I would not have pegged West Texas A&M as I didn't have any kind of clear understanding, but I would not have guessed WT.
Yeah,
very
lived out in Northwest Texas for all 3 or 4 years that I was at school, and it was a great place to be. And so there's still, I think, we have those foundational places for us, particularly in that young adulthood period.
For sure.
That is one of those places for me. That drive out 287, it's a boring drive for many people. Keith doesn't really prefer that drive, but that kind of drive, that makes my soul come alive a little bit, to just have wide open roadway.
Amen. Well, I think speaks to a very small way in which the Spirit has uniquely gifted you for this season of the Horizon Texas Conference, because you get to drive those roads over and over again.
Exactly.
Very good. We're in this season of getting to know each other more fully and getting to know our neighbors more fully. When we talk about getting to know our neighbors and reaching our neighbors, are there any kind of resources that you're highlighting in the midst of this season with our master classes?
Yeah, so let's shift to some of what we're talking about in master classes. I brought a couple things for you. This is not myself on the shelf. This is a master class on a shelf.
Nice, I like it.
So there's 2 resources and this one is the book Beacon of Hope. And so Bringing This by Ken Willard, it just released this fall. This book is probably one of the best evangelism primers that I've seen in a long time. So for our in-person master classes, I actually called Ken and had him help give us a little deal and ordered 100 of these, and we've taken 10 of them to every district and kind of distributed to the churches and the clergy and laity that were there. So this book sort of walks you through the basics of evangelism, which sometimes is the E word that we feel like we can't talk about very much because in our culture and world, it's been a little bit co-opted from some of us in mainline church.
Yeah, for me, it was one of those things where I knew what I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And so for a decade of my adult life, I just didn't do it.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like from 16 to 26, there was just I couldn't find a way to reframe. I knew I didn't want to be the street corner preacher. I knew I didn't want to come from a place of judgment and anger and frustration of I'm right, you're wrong, get over. Like I didn't want to embody any of that. But it was hard to find my testimony in that. And I think so many folks have lived some of that experience.
Yeah. So this book will walk you through telling your personal testimony of faith. We'll talk about that in a minute too.
Yeah.
Also, and this one gets a little tricky, evaluating the ministries of the church to figure out what makes you come alive still, and also which things you're doing as a church, that you're all doing it because you genuinely enjoy being together, and yet you sort of have this pit in your stomach or a little birdie in your head that's like, I would really rather be at home taking a nap, or our time might be better spent, or it might be better if we didn't try and do this big event where we're all putting money in so that we can give our own money in order to help support the church. What would just happen if we stopped trying to do that? We just all gave that money to the church. Right. But it takes a lot of courage to enter into those conversations, because these are meaningful modes of evangelism that have worked historically for us, but they're not working anymore. They're actually sometimes pushing people away or causing us to kind of feel like we're spinning our wheels as a church a little bit. So he walks through that, and he also takes you all the way through hospitality, sort of that first master class of what do you do when a guest comes in, and how do you move them to a place of belonging? How do you be sure that you're capturing information? Those sorts of things.
Very good.
Yeah. So this is one tool. The other thing I brought is a really cool, this is called a listening deck. It's got a cute little church on it. Looks like a deck of cards. But inside this deck, there's a series of cards that are listening to God, listening to congregation, and listening to your community, or listening to your neighbors. So there's a couple ways that you could use these cards, and you can buy them from listeningchurch.com. The book's available on Amazon. And if you really just need help accessing those resources, let us know. We'll get you connected. But these cards are meant to be used in a couple ways. You could use them as a leadership to choose one or two that you as a leadership, or maybe one from each category of your church, are walking through exploring during a period of time. Or you could develop a rhythm where you're spreading these cards on a table at the back of a worship space, and encouraging folks to take one for a week, see what they learn as they listen to God, listen to congregation, listen to community, and then bring that back. Maybe find a way to collect those stories, put them on a Post-it wall or something like that. So these are two of the newest resources that are kind of out in the church development world that I think are really helpful and really, really good.
That's really cool. I mean, I know locally we're on about a 3 or 4 year journey of beginning with intentional neighboring and kind of moving into starting new places for new people and expanding different things. But our next step, as we've talked with our leadership coming into next year, is how do we listen more fully? And so I'm going to get some of these. And I'm excited for this kind of idea. And it's something that appears to be done really well, that we don't have to like recreate the wheel, right? But to get to invite our folks into that posture of curiosity, right? Because so often that's where we begin. Right? If we want to know our neighbors more fully, we got to begin with that place of curiosity. Yeah. I love that it invites us to share our testimony too, but that curiosity creates the way for someone to even care. Right. what you have to say.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right.
You've worked with this for a number of districts now.
Yeah.
Right. You've introduced this in a number of ways. Is there a moment or a story from one of those master classes that kind of sticks with you when somebody is kind of having a light bulb come on, or telling the testimony of their church in a way that this is found home and root?
For sure. So in this masterclass series, there's a point in the middle. One of the things we heard on the feedback was, one, let it go a little longer, right? So we stretched them to those 2 hours, but also give us a good break. And so we've given a good break in the middle of these masterclass series, but that break comes with a bit of a homework assignment in those 10 or 15 minutes that we're out. And typically when I introduce this homework assignment, I'm going to tell you what it is in a minute, the folks around the table go, and the answer we give one another is, if we can't accept this task in this room with people who are all followers of Jesus, and I know you don't know what the task yet is, so just hang on. Okay. If we can't do it in this room, then how are we going to do it in the world? How are we going to fulfill God's mission to us to make disciples of all nations? And so right before that break, we walk through 4 boxes of how to create your elevator pitch of a testimony. Okay. So what's challenging about this, and Ken Willard in the book kind of reveals, if you've ever done a spiritual gift assessment, that 92% of folks, Christians in America, do not have the spiritual gift of evangelism at the top of their list.
Interesting. Okay.
And so I think for some of us, that's produced a place where we're like, okay, well, it's not my gift. Yeah. Someone else is going to do it. Someone else is more comfortable standing there and telling their testimony. We're really comfortable living our witness, what it's like for our lives to show our faith, but to actually use words and tell our testimony, not of the church, but of Jesus in our own lives, makes us really uncomfortable. But if prayer wasn't at the top of your spiritual gift list, would that mean that you never have to pray?
Right.
No. Just because it's not the top of your gifts doesn't mean that you get excused from it forever. Right. It just means you got to work really hard to figure out what it looks like in who God has called and created you to be. So those 4 questions and boxes that we give folks to fill out are, what was your life like before Christ? How did God get your attention?
Okay. Yeah.
What was coming back to Christ like?
Yeah.
And how is your life different? So typically in these master classes, most folks just look at those 4 boxes and they're like, I don't know where to start. But in our master class in the East District, I took with me my 6th grade confirmation prayer buddy. And he's great.
Yeah.
And so he is in a room with adults, and we had some young adults, some college students from our Wesley Center there in that class as well. And he came up and he said, Pastor Stacey, I don't have a story of faith yet. I'm like, well, you may not have your ultimate story of faith, right? Like your faith is going to grow. You're going to have a different story. But let's talk about your story of faith to this point, right? So tell me about some of the things you're doing as a part of your confirmation journey. And he said, I'm reading my Bible every day. I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
Why are you reading your Bible every day? What caused you to make that decision? And he said, my mom downloaded an app. And I said, so how is your life different now that you're reading your Bible every day? And he said, I know more about Jesus than I've ever known before. And I said, well, how is that different from a year ago or when you were in 3rd grade? He was like, well, when I was in 3rd grade, I just went to church. And so together we wrote his story in those 4 boxes. And that young man walked all the way around the room, and to every adult in the room, he said this, I'd like to tell you my story of faith. I used to just go to church. Then my mom downloaded a Bible app. Now I read or listen to my Bible every day, and I know more about Jesus than I ever have before.
So good.
Sometimes we're afraid to tell our stories of faith because they're raw and they're vulnerable, and we feel like we're not exactly sure how to quantify what God's doing in our life.
Right.
But I think if we start by just putting one sentence in each of those boxes, or maybe 2 or 3, right? It'll grow as you go. You don't have to tell someone your whole life story.
Well, and that's the temptation, right? Either we
so
claim up and
hard.
say nothing, or we go, here's a 30-minute spiel about how God was in every moment of my life, including some tangents that, were, you had nothing to do with Jesus, but it just, my ADD kicked in and I told you this other,
And these deeply personal things that feel a little bit unsafe to tell you, but I feel like I can't tell you my story of faith if I don't tell you these things, right? We're not talking about creating situations where we feel unsafe, physically, psychologically, socially. We're talking about figuring out how do we move past our discomfort of something that's not our regular, normal, top of our gifts list in order to share a story for the reason, for the hope we have. Yeah. And I really believe that our neighbors around us need to know why we still have hope.
Well, and I love the way that approaches it, because I can't tell you how many good Methodists I've known over the course of my life who look at their lives and say, my story is not one of recovery from addiction, or, I was way over here and then I had the aha moment and I came, it's that steady, ongoing faithfulness that grows and grows, right?
Right.
And that's a story.
Yeah.
But people don't feel like it's a story.
Well, that was my crisis of faith moment. I don't think we've talked about this on the podcast yet, but I've talked about this in these master classes. So that time when I was at WT, I actually had a pretty huge crisis of faith. I mean, I grew up in the United Methodist Church. I've always been a United Methodist kid. And I was the kid in the youth group that led devotional, ad council, and did those things, right? Yeah. Had a leadership role. And went to school, was working at these 3 churches, and noticed that everyone out around me had a date and a time and a camp and a pastor.
Yeah.
And I had lots of dates and times and camps and pastors, but I couldn't tell you at which one I said the magical prayer.
Right.
And so I really remember thinking to myself, I'm a hypocrite. I think I follow Jesus. I'm trying to do this the right way. But 17, 18, 19-year-old me wasn't sure that I really had it right. And I didn't know who to talk to about that. I had great pastors. It wasn't that they weren't accessible. I just didn't know how to tell that story. And when I finally did, my early 20s, I had a pastor who was like, hey, some people are light switches.
Right.
Some people are dimmer switches. And you, sister, are a dimmer switch. Right? Yeah. So, my journey of coming back to Christ is trying to position myself where I'm ready to say yes. And some days I do that well, and some days I do not do that well. But a part of how my life is different is really trying to hold that posture to an openness to the Spirit in all things. Because I have found historically when I say no, I'm not going to do something, or it isn't where I'd like to go, either the bishop calls.
Right.
Or something happens in my own life that's like, oh no, I'm going that way. And so my initial kind of gut response of someone else can do that, which I think is our response to evangelism. Someone else would be better at that. I've learned to sort of hold that. It's a real feeling. It's a real thought.
Yeah.
And also say, God, if that's what you're going to do, I'll go.
Right.
We'll figure it out.
Well, and on the evangelism front, one of the joys of serving in the Horizon Texas Conference is the breadth of our geography and the communities we serve in. And, you know, for me, I know I've served in very rural county seat places and in suburban places. And one of my good country boys gave me an image for this that I just love, but also speaks to the piece of it that says sometimes it's somebody else's job, not ours.
Right.
Right. This was a guy who'd been a cowboy who'd been raised in the Baptist church, who'd become a Methodist at some point along the way and was a foundational leader at one of the communities I served. And part of what he said is, you know, when we talk about fishing for people, the Baptists are way better at catching than you Methodists are, but nobody can clean them like a Methodist, right? And the impulse there is that, you know, we do way better with Wesley's sanctifying grace, right? That ongoing journey of growing in Christ than we do with the evangelism, with the outreach, with the kind of bringing somebody to come to a claim of faith for themselves, right? And every time I've told that story, people laugh and go, yeah, that's not our job. I'm like, whoa, we've missed part of the point, right?
Yeah.
Part of the point is a recognition that sometimes, you know, our Southern Baptist brothers and sisters have a theological emphasis that makes them really good at sharing why faith matters to them and inviting folks to claim it for themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And that historically, our best work has been done in the helping people grow in faith and embody that faith long term, right? But that doesn't, just like the spiritual gifts inventory, just because prayer is not number one of my thing doesn't mean I don't need to pray, right? And just because we're seemingly better at helping people grow in faith and inviting them into it to begin with, doesn't mean that God hadn't called us to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That work is still ours to do because, frankly, there are folks who will hear the witness of Christ in and through our Wesleyan communities that will not hear it in other communities, right? Because of the way we convey that message, because of the community that we convey it in, and the heart behind it, right? And so it's still our work to do. And it will always be our work to do.
It will. And, you know, that story is a good story. The other analogy, and we're not going to go too far into this one because it gets a little problematic, as most metaphors do.
Sure.
They break down at some point. So this one's going to have it's going to have a limit. I'm going to claim that before we get there. But there's some significant differences between fishing and hunting. And I think oftentimes when we think evangelism, we think of a hunting style. I'm going to go get something and I'm going to bring it back.
Right.
And that's not really what Jesus is calling us to do. When Jesus says, go be fishers of men, let's think about what fishing is, right? I've been fishing a few times in my life. I'm not a huge fisherman. The last time, well, wasn't the last time. One of the times when I fished when I was younger, I caught a snapping turtle at my grandparents' farm, and I was a piano player, and my grandma was like, run up the hill. And so I had to go run up the hill, and my grandpa had to free the snapping turtle. It was a whole thing.
I caught a snake near my grandparents' house growing up, too, and it was I just took that lead and tossed it into, you know.
A commonality we didn't know we had.
There you go.
So fishing is about waiting.
Yeah.
It's about conditions. It's about environment. It's about atmosphere. It's about waiting for the fish to come to you.
Yeah.
Rather than going to get something and bring it home. And so, you know, I think with evangelism, sometimes we go fishing for people as Jesus called us to, and we're like, well, I didn't catch anybody. Must not be my thing.
Yeah.
And so we don't go again, rather than saying it just wasn't a good day on the lake. But did we enjoy the time?
Right.
Did we sit together? Did we experience God's presence in a way? And so fishing for people, as Jesus calls us to do, is all about, you know, there is bait. There is what we put in the world, our witness that people see.
Good to share.
That cause people to be curious about things. And that increases their receptivity to hearing stories of faith. Not every person is ready to hear the stories I shared with you today.
Right.
They're not ready to hear that. That does more damage than good. But if we sit in that boat long enough, we sit in the world long enough, we wait for the conditions to be right, we develop the relationships with the people around us, there will come a moment of curiosity and receptivity that we have to be prepared for. And so a part of our present challenge is, can we be clear enough and healthy enough and ready enough that, as one of our district superintendents says, right, when the Spirit moves, we're ready to go wherever she is, rather than being stuck in where we are or feeling like it's someone else's work to do.
Well, and I love that fishing metaphor. I'm drawn back to Lake Bonito in
That's a great
New
name
Mexico,
for a lake.
right? Now, if you're a Texan, you call it Lake Bonito.
Bonito.
But it's in the middle of New Mexico, about an hour outside of Ruidoso. It's a beautiful mountain lake. You can go and spend the day just fishing from the bank. It's a catch and release lake. And I remember one time we were there, I had really good bait.
Yeah.
And I cast it out there, and I could see the fish. And the bait was sitting right next to him.
Yeah, he wasn't ready.
But he wasn't ready. He'd been caught and released too many times. And so we just sat there. And in a world where people have religious trauma, where people have been hurt and harmed by the church, where the messaging, I mean, there are times when we do have good news to share, but it's not the right moment for somebody to be ready to receive it.
Yeah.
And how do we continue to just be the people of good news who God called us to be, so that we're ready when that moment shifts and changes?
Yeah, I think the world needs more people who just sit there, but understand what the Spirit has done to cause them to come alive and are ready to lean into those places and the moments that are right.
Yeah. As we think about this, and the good Pod Strangely Warm community that is listening to this, if folks haven't had a chance to engage in the masterclass, right? I know today is the last one, right?
It's the last one. It's virtual.
Zoom webinar in about an hour and a half.
We do.
So pray for Stacey.
And the technology.
In the aftermath.
It's going to be great.
It will be.
Yeah.
It will be what it needs to be.
It
right? will. But as folks are thinking about this, other than buying the book and considering the deck of cards, as you think about kind of first steps for the average member of one of our Horizon Texas Conference churches and kind of reconnecting and reacquainting themselves with this concept of intentionally trying to reach their neighbors, where might they begin?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. One, figure out how to tell your story, not the story of your church, not what your church needs, but your personal story with Jesus. And that takes some work. That takes some prayer and reflection and sometimes sitting alone, but sometimes talking it out with people. And so be the kind of folks in your churches that watch for those moments when you're in a group of people who are ready for that. And together use those 4 questions and practice telling your stories of faith. One of the hard truths of this, I think, and there's grief in this, is that reaching new people is not going to save every church.
Right.
We've had seasons where if we build things and did things, people would come and it was glorious. And we've had seasons where we go out and we find people, we bring them back to the church and they were great. And we've had seasons when we've gone out and we've stayed out in communities and we've seen God bear fruit in that. And this next season of ministry, we don't know what that model is yet. And so we have to use all of those things and those lenses for how do we take things that might have been working before and put a new lens on them. If they've always happened in the church, what do we do to get them outside the walls of the church? If they've always happened outside, what do we do to build a bridge back toward the church? And so having a real keen eye and courage, particularly as lay leaders in the church, to say, the 2 examples, I'll use one of them just for time's sake.
Sure.
The 5th Sunday potluck, where everybody used to daisy chain all the things together and you hope the fire marshal didn't come in because everyone had to plug in their crock pots to keep things warm for worship. And you stacked it all in the fridge so you could unstack it just right. And the oven was full, but also like you were stacking things there just to keep things warm. And after worship, everybody pitched in and they tore down the stuff and they put up the tables and you stayed and you had lunch together. Well, in some of our churches now, I think 5th Sunday potluck feel a little bit like this. Hey, it's 5th Sunday potluck. I hope that, I hope you're going to stay with us. And folks are like, yeah, I'm going to go home and get my casserole, but they don't come back. Or because of dietary restrictions or other needs, people bring a salad and macaroni, cheese, and dessert. And so they bring too much and they go through and just eat their own food. And everybody goes home with too much food because everybody's afraid to eat everybody else's food. And that's real, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's real.
One case of food poisoning at the church potluck will make you real hesitant on potlucks for a very long time.
And so, we're in a season where if you're going to a church thing and you're thinking to yourself, I'm guessing we'd all probably rather be at home and come back and just watch the game together tonight or whatever it is. It is going to take 1 or 2 of you to have the courage to say, I don't think this is making us come alive anymore. It worked. It had a season. It was great. But now we need to rethink, how are we building relationships, people to people and people to God? And what's a new way that we could try? What's a new experiment that we could run? And our hypothesis might be wrong. We might think it's great. But we also might learn that we really like the fifth Sunday potluck better. And so we're going back to that. That's the beauty of an experiment. You can try it, and then you give a little release valve. If it doesn't work, we're going to go right back to the other thing.
That's why every time you're changing something in your worship order, you do it for Advent or you do it for Lent, right? A prescribed season of the church life. We're going to try it, and if it works, we keep it. If it doesn't,
we're going to go right back.
We go back.
Well, and to the strength training thing that we talked about earlier, like I recognize we got a lot more strength training to do. And so one of the things, this next masterclass we're going to do in early 26 is going to be a webinar, and it's going to be with Ken Willard, who wrote Beacon of Hope.
Oh, very good.
And he's going to actually do an hour and a half webinar for us on January 11th from 1 to 2:30. So you can either go get your food or have a potluck as a leadership and maybe watch this together at your church. Or if you have a small church, watch it with another small church nearby you. And Ken's going to talk about building a bridge event. What is it like to get outside the walls of your church to build bridges with your community? And part of my hope and prayer is that all across the Horizon Texas Conference in 2026, we're trying some bridge events. Yeah. We're experimenting with some new things. We're getting outside of our walls to reach new people. We're moving into places where we're moving through our discomfort to places that are helping us to come alive, that we're excited and passionate about, to watch the Holy Spirit do some new things and actually really to catch up with where the Holy Spirit's already working. Yeah. Some of those experiments are going to be great. Some of those bridge events we're going to learn a lot from that's going to be successful. Yeah. Some of them are going to feel like you gathered as a church and it didn't work the way you wanted to.
And that's okay.
It's okay. So to resist that sense of disappointment, to be able to say, we're together and we learned something, right? We learned that today the fish just need to watch.
Right.
They just need to see. Because a lot of people drove past while we were doing this today, and what they saw was a community of people filled with joy. Yeah. And maybe today that's all they needed. Yeah. But the next time we try this, they might be curious enough to stop. So we're playing a long game that stretches us outside of where we currently are into a thing we don't understand yet. But we're going to run some experiments to see if we can figure out how to get there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I love that that can happen at our churches. It can also happen with our individual lay leaders. We, when we were looking at doing some intentional neighboring work at Martin a couple of years ago, we tasked folks with hosting a block party in their neighborhood, right? At some point over the summer, right? And a decent chunk of our folks took us up on that. And 80% of them were one-off events, right? Yeah. People got to know their neighbors, they hosted a thing, but in a couple of instances, we've got folks who now have annual 4th of July neighborhood gatherings that our people have launched and hosted and welcomed new people in the neighborhood and have like stacked those opportunities because they're willing to try. Yeah. And so do we say our focus is going to be on the 2 or 3 or 4 that really took root or the 80% that didn't?
Right.
I think we can give thanks that we tried and give thanks for what is. And all of it helps us know our neighbors better.
That's right.
Stacey, thank you so much for your time. You are, I think, the busiest woman in the Horizon Texas Conference.
I don't know about that, but you're welcome.
Well, I do. I've seen your calendar, and if you want to get tired for someone, watch Stacey's social media. She is everywhere, and it's what our conference needs in this season. Yeah. But no, we see it, and we're thankful for all the ways in which you are supporting, encouraging, and equipping the saints for the work of ministry right here in HTC. I know you've got about 17,000 other things today. So thanks for being with us on Pod Strangely Warmed. Until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins, and this has been Pod Strangely Warmed. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even more.
So Easter of COVID.
Oh, yeah.
One of my kiddos, so we used to do a Zoom gathering. We were still at our house, right? Because we were at the school. Then we had to move everything to my house because we were like, we don't have a place to be. Yeah. We're not ever going back in the school. And so the Easter Zoom greeting beforehand, right as we're all pushing leave, one of our kiddos goes, "Happy Easter, everybody." And I cannot. And Keith is like, "Pull it together." I'm like, "I can't." Yeah. And I was preaching Mary weeping at the tomb.
Oh, yeah.
And I literally cried through my, not
I think
sob.
all of us preached Mary weeping
I
at
know,
the tomb.
I wasn't sobbing, but I visibly cried through that entire sermon. And I'm like, it was probably one of the best sermons I've ever preached in that way, because it was just so real.
So real. And, well, and that's what people longed for in that moment.
Right.
Was where
there
is real
joy.
Hope and joy and connection.
And still this sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of
terrible.
this is true. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I feel like we've given you so much testing with us.
Yeah.
Oh,
some of this will somehow get cut and put
it will.
at the very end of the episode. And
exactly.